Imagine it is a Friday afternoon. The clock on your phone shifts to 5 p.m. and a notification chimes. Your bi-weekly paycheck has landed. You open your banking app, staring at the numbers reflecting on the glass screen. It is a solid number, but it is not extraordinary. It is not the kind of balance the digital prophets of modern wealth flaunt in their curated 30-second clips. There are no exotic vehicles waiting for you in a pristine garage, no six-figure automated portfolios ticking upward while you sleep, no secret algorithms working on your behalf. It is simply your life, quantified in a digital ledger. Almost instantly, before you can even close the app, a subtle, cold pressure begins to tighten inside your chest. The invisible checklist awakens. The rent or mortgage, the rising cost of groceries, the electricity bill, the insurance premium, and that persistent, quiet dread of an unexpected emergency. You begin running the calculations in your head. A frantic internal math that never quite feels complete. Every month feels like an exhausting race against an accelerating clock, and the clock is winning. But across town, there is another man. He earns the exact same income. His title is unremarkable, his daily routine looks identical to yours, and his external world presents no obvious advantages. Yet, he sleeps deeply through the night. He does not check his banking app with a racing heart. He does not spiral into panic when his car requires a new set of tires. He is entirely detached from the perpetual loop of financial anxiety that consumes the modern subconscious. What does this man know that you do not? The collective myth of our culture dictates that security is an architectural byproduct of scale, that to cure the sickness of financial dread, you simply must inject more capital into the system. But long before modern consumerism colonized the human mind, an ancient culture discovered a different law. True dominion over your reality begins long before your revenue increases. It begins in the dark, unexamined corners of how you perceive existence itself. Consider a society completely stripped of its material foundations. In the decades following the mid-20th century, the people of Japan found themselves standing amidst absolute devastation. Resources were non-existent, currency was volatile, and average household incomes were reduced to mere survival wages. By all modern metrics of economic psychology, this population should have been paralyzed by collective despair and financial chaos. Yet, over the subsequent decades, this specific culture engineered one of the most resilient, disciplined, and profoundly wealthy household saving paradigms on Earth. They did not achieve this through complex corporate financial engineering or high-risk speculative ventures. They did it by introducing the ordinary citizen to an internal structure. It was a mental architecture designed not for the elite merchant, but for the average individual navigating a modest life. It was a philosophy so devastatingly simple that the modern mind, blinded by complexity, completely overlooks it. To understand why you feel perpetually impoverished regardless of what lands in your account, we must examine the hidden mechanics of your psychological architecture. The primary crisis of the modern professional is not a structural deficit of resources, but a foundational vulnerability in how energy is preserved. Think of your existence as a voyager, standing beside an ancient desert well. Every sequence of effort allows you to lower a wooden bucket into the deep earth and pull up water. The water represents your hard-earned revenue, your life force converted into currency. The bucket represents the framework of your daily life. Now imagine that your bucket is riddled with microscopic, almost invisible perforations. A tiny fracture at the base, a loose seam near the handle. To a casual observer, the vessel looks perfectly intact. But something even more dangerous happens when you begin your walk back to your dwelling. Because the holes are small, you do not notice the moisture escaping into the hot sand. A small automatic subscription you forgot to cancel here, an inflated delivery fee there, an impulsive digital purchase made in the isolation of midnight, a premium beverage purchased out of sheer boredom, an item bought purely because a red tag claimed it was discounted. These are not cataclysmic financial disasters. They are micro leaks. Yet, by the time you sit down at your table to assess your resources, half of your water has evaporated into nothingness. You look at your empty hands and assume you simply need a larger well or a bigger rope. You blame your income. But the structural truth of human nature is that a larger bucket with the same perforations only bleeds faster. The modern economic engine is explicitly engineered to hide these perforations from your conscious awareness. It operates on a psychological principle known as the decoupling effect. In the era of physical currency, every transaction possessed an inherent, visceral friction. To part with your wealth meant physically reaching into your pocket, drawing out paper bills that represented hours of your finite mortal life, and watching them leave your hand. The brain processed this as a literal loss, activating the insula, the same region responsible for registering physical discomfort. But today, that pain has been completely anesthetized. With the advent of single-tap digital payments, facial recognition purchases, and embedded credentials, the distance between desire and depletion has been reduced to milliseconds. Your brain no longer registers that you are parting with your security. It merely registers that a button was pushed and a dopamine spike was delivered. This introduces us to the first major psychological principle of our exploration: hedonic adaptation. Why is it that, no matter how many times your compensation increases, the sensation of scarcity remains completely unaltered? When you receive a promotion or a windfall, your baseline of comfort immediately adjusts to the new altitude. The luxury of yesterday becomes the non-negotiable necessity of today. You believe you are climbing a mountain toward safety, but you are actually running on a treadmill that accelerates to match your pace. The human mind is naturally terrified of empty spaces, both environmental and emotional. When there is a surplus of capital in an unmonitored account, the ego perceives it as an unfulfilled vacuum that must be filled with material signifiers of status or comfort. Let us look closer at how history offers an antidote to this modern sickness. In the early 20th century, an extraordinary woman named Hanne Motoko, recognized as Japan's first female journalist, observed that her country was transitioning into a fast-paced, modern economy. She saw that ordinary people were losing their centeredness, becoming swept up in the tides of industrial consumerism. In response, she introduced a concept called Kakeibo, which translates literally to the household finance ledger. On its surface, contemporary observers might dismiss this as a rudimentary budgeting tool. They see a simple journal and assume it holds no relevance for a high-tech world. But they are profoundly mistaken. Kakeibo was never a tool of mathematics, it was an instrument of profound psychological observation. Hanne Motoko understood a foundational truth about human nature: we cannot manage what we refuse to witness. The entire system is built upon forcing the individual to sit in absolute silence with 4 fundamental inquiries at the dawn of every monthly cycle. How much resources do you possess? How much do you realistically desire to preserve? How much are you actually utilizing? And crucially, how can you elevate your conduct? Notice the deliberate sequencing of these inquiries. It does not begin with an aggressive mandate to restrict your life. It begins with an inventory of truth. The modern consumer operates on a catastrophic sequence. They experience an impulse, they execute the transaction, and only weeks later do they experience the regret of reflection. This ancient framework completely upends that loop. It demands that reflection occurs before the transaction can ever manifest. But something even more dangerous happens when we look at the emotional drivers behind our modern balance sheets. Think of the last time you spent money on something non-essential. If you trace the anatomy of that choice back to its origin, you will rarely find a logical necessity. Instead, you will find a displaced emotion. You had a brutal day at your workspace, threatened by the silent judgment of your peers, so you purchased a garment you cannot afford to project an illusion of invulnerability. You felt isolated on a Tuesday evening, so you ordered an excessive meal via an app to experience a temporary wave of comfort. You felt insignificant, so you bought a device to feel relevant. We are constantly attempting to solve spiritual and psychological deficits with material acquisitions. Kakeibo acts as a mirror, forcing you to look at the receipt and ask not what the item cost, but what emotion you were trying to sedate when you handed over your card. To survive the economic turbulence of the modern era, an individual must adopt the philosophy of the bamboo forest. When you observe a mature bamboo stalk, it appears remarkably delicate. It is thin, hollow, and possesses no massive structural girth like an oak or a redwood. Yet, when a typhoon tears through the valley, the rigid oak is often uprooted and shattered into kindling, while the flexible bamboo bends to the absolute limit of the earth and snaps back uninjured once the storm passes. The secret of the bamboo is entirely invisible to the naked eye. Beneath the surface of the soil, a single bamboo seed spends years developing a massive, complex, and deeply intertwined root network. Before a single green shoot ever breaks through the mud, it establishes its strength in total anonymity, before it ever attempts to claim vertical territory. The average person approaches their life with an inverted philosophy. They want the visible height. Before they have established the underground root system, they receive their income, and their immediate instinct is to distribute it outward to the world, to landlords, to digital streaming platforms, to fashion houses, to restaurants. They pay everyone else first, leaving their own financial house to survive on the crumbs that happen to remain at the end of the month. The ancient paradigm turns this completely on its head through a principle we define as primary self-preservation. Before a single dollar is allocated to the external world, a non-negotiable portion of your life force must be sequestered and locked away into your root system. When you implement this, an incredible psychological transformation occurs. If you receive $2,000 and immediately remove $200 to build your roots, your brain undergoes a subtle shift. It no longer views your income as $2,000. It accepts $1,800 as the absolute perimeter of your reality. The human mind is remarkably adaptive. It will expand its desires to consume whatever space you provide it, but it will also contract its operations to fit within a tightly defined boundary. By reducing the available space up front, you invoke Parkinson's law to work in your favor rather than your destruction. You stop treating preservation as an afterthought and begin treating it as an act of absolute sovereignty. But we must confront the modern architect of our financial decay, the cult of frictionless convenience. We live in an era that worships the removal of all human effort. We are told that the ultimate sign of success is a life where you never have to move your body, never have to prepare your nourishment, never have to maintain your own tools, and never have to endure a moment of physical delay. Every tech conglomerate in Silicon Valley is locked in a desperate arms race to remove friction from your existence. But they are not doing it to liberate you. They are doing it because, when friction is removed from life, the psychological guardrails of human judgment are completely dismantled. Consider the historical contrast. In traditional Japanese households, even well into the modern era, the physical act of managing cash remained deeply integrated into daily life. Money was often divided into physical paper envelopes, labeled for specific utilities. To spend money on entertainment meant physically taking currency out of the entertainment envelope and watching the stack diminish. This created an omnipresent feedback loop of tactile awareness. Contrast this with the modern American lifestyle, where a single digital account is linked to 5 different background applications, automatically pulling capital for rideshares, food deliveries, and cloud storage. Without a single moment of conscious intervention, you are being bled to death by 1,000 silent cuts. And because there is no blood on your hands, you believe you are completely healthy. But something even more dangerous happens when convenience completely erases the relationship between effort and consumption. When you spend an hour preparing a meal with raw ingredients, your mind understands the profound investment of time and energy required to sustain your body. You value the food differently. When you can summon that same meal to your doorstep with a double click of a side button while lying on your couch, the connection between human labor and survival is entirely severed. Capital loses its weight. It becomes an abstract digital score, a video game currency that you spend carelessly because it doesn't feel real. True wealth preservation requires the deliberate reintroduction of strategic friction into your daily routines. It requires you to make it difficult for your impulses to sabotage your future. This brings us to a timeless truth embedded in the folklore of the East, the philosophy of the single grain of rice. There is an ancient proverb that states even dust, when accumulated over centuries, can form a sacred mountain. In our contemporary culture, we are pathologically obsessed with the grand gesture. We watch films and read articles that celebrate the massive, overnight transformation. The tech founder who sells his enterprise for millions, the speculative investor who strikes a vein of digital gold, the dramatic career pivot that doubles an income instantly. We treat these anomalies as the blueprint for life. Consequently, when we are faced with the small, seemingly insignificant choices of our daily existence, we dismiss them as irrelevant. We think to ourselves, what difference does it make if I spend $5 on this coffee? It will not make me rich, and saving it will not make me a homeowner. This is the ultimate deception of human nature. Your future is not constructed by the massive, dramatic choices you make twice a decade. It is meticulously sculpted by the hundreds of invisible, micro decisions you make between sunrise and sunset every single day. A single grain of rice possesses no capacity to alleviate hunger. It is weightless, inconsequential, and easily discarded, but 1,000,000 grains of rice can sustain an entire village through the coldest winter. Every single dollar that flows through your hands is a seed. It holds the genetic potential to either be consumed for a fleeting moment of sensory gratification or to be planted deep within your domain to grow into an independent orchard that provides shade for your future self. When you casually throw away small amounts of capital because they seem insignificant, you are not just discarding paper, you are burning the future time and freedom that capital could have purchased for you. Money is simply frozen time. It is the physical manifestation of the hours you spent away from your family, the energy you expended under pressure, and the intellect you directed toward a task. When you treat small expenses with carelessness, you are actively devaluing your own mortality. The master of inner dominion looks at a single dollar not for what it can purchase in the immediate second, but for what it can compound into over a horizon of years. They understand that the mountain is nothing more than an organized collective of dust. To guide you out of the labyrinth of modern financial anxiety, we must transition from theory into execution. We must construct a systematic blueprint that reconfigures your psychological and material reality over a definitive timeline. This is not a superficial set of budgeting tricks. It is a rigorous process of identity transformation. If you continue to perceive yourself as an impoverished victim of systemic inflation, no amount of tactical advice will save you. You must fundamentally alter who you are in relation to the material world. Let us outline the architectural timeline of your transformation, beginning with the immediate 30-day horizon. The objective of the first 30 days is not to accumulate vast wealth, but to break the spell of unconscious consumption. For the next 4 weeks, your primary mandate is the absolute restoration of sight. You will establish a physical ledger, not a spreadsheet, not a digital application, but a physical book that requires your hand to press ink into paper. Every single cent that exits your sphere must be manually recorded at the conclusion of each day. You will categorize every expenditure into 4 strict dimensions: survival necessities, occupational tools, cultural cultivation, and non-essential impulses. During this initial phase, you will inevitably confront the raw discomfort of your own patterns. You will experience what psychologists call cognitive dissonance, the painful clash between who you believe you are and what your actions prove you to be. you will see the cumulative total of your minor comforts, and it will shock you, but this shock is the exact catalyst required for awakening. By the time you reach day 30, you will have achieved something 95% of the population will never possess absolute clarity. You will know exactly where your life force is bleeding out, and the mere act of observing the leaks will instinctively cause you to begin tightening the valves. As you cross into the 90-day horizon, the focus shifts from observation to structural containment. Your visual landscape now shifts to a dense, misty bamboo forest at twilight, where a traveler holds a single paper lantern. The mist is thick, swallowing everything beyond a few feet. You cannot see the destination, nor can you see the twists and turns of the trail ahead. There is only a small, flickering circle of light cast upon the immediate ground. In the face of this blindness, the average modern mind freezes. Most people refuse to move. They demand absolute certainty, guaranteed safety, and undeniable proof that every effort will lead to flawless success before they take a single step. But the lantern was never designed to illuminate the mountain. It was engineered to show you only the next step. This psychological paralysis is precisely where financial vulnerability is weaponized against the individual. Those trapped in lower income brackets remain immobilized because they are constantly forced to look at the entire, overwhelming horizon all at once. They are told they must simultaneously solve retirement, home ownership, emergency reserves, and complex investment portfolios. The sheer scale of the future becomes a psychological weight so heavy that it crushes the capacity to act. The distance feels cosmic, insurmountable, and fundamentally hostile. But something even more dangerous happens when you allow the vastness of the mountain to dictate your movement. Your brain, seeking psychological survival from this existential dread, defaults to learned helplessness. To understand why this mechanism triggers, we must examine the concept of micro steps, pioneered within the structured frameworks of traditional Japanese systems. They do not demand that an individual conquer the peak on day one. Instead, they elevate the absolute supremacy of the immediate tactical move. Consider the hidden architecture of a simple Japanese teacup. It holds immense value, not because it is infinitely expandable, but because it possesses a definitive, unyielding boundary. It is valuable precisely because it knows its own capacity. Yet, the modern American economic landscape operates on a predatory philosophy of engineered dissatisfaction. It whispers that your current container is chronically insufficient, that you require a higher salary, a grander home, and a more extravagant external identity. The goalposts are intentionally mounted on wheels. The moment you arrive, they are rolled further into the distance. You acquire the object, only to realize the hunger has merely been displaced, not satisfied. For those operating with limited financial resources, this psychological trap inflicts a double wound. The first wound is the material constraint itself. The second, far more lethal wound, is the internal rot of social comparison. By measuring your private reality against another individual's carefully curated public theater, you enter a state of perpetual psychological poverty. The mind becomes a chaotic battlefield of envy, anxiety, and unfulfillment. To break this cycle, you must weaponize the concept of absolute containment. This requires moving beyond mere ambition and asking a question that the modern consumer apparatus deeply fears. What is enough? This question is highly volatile to the established order, because the moment you answer it with absolute clarity, the manipulative machinery of modern marketing loses its grip on your consciousness. You stop sprinting on a treadmill designed by corporations. You cease purchasing status symbols to impress strangers you do not respect. You begin constructing a fortress that belongs entirely to you. The psychological truth is profound. An individual with a modest income who possesses a mastery over their desires lives in a state of absolute strategic sovereignty, while a high earner who cannot control their appetites remains a desperate, frantic slave. True internal stability is never generated by the gross volume of your revenue. It is dictated entirely by your psychological relationship with that revenue. It is your relationship with desire itself. This insight shifts your entire trajectory as you transition from the 90-day mark toward the 180-day horizon. By day 180, your identity undergoes a systemic mutation. You are no longer someone desperately trying to save money through sheer willpower. You become an individual who values operational discipline over cheap convenience. Within this window, the prediction timeline begins to manifest its structural rewards. At 30 days, you achieve the raw shock of sight. At 90 days, you establish defensive containment. By day 180, the compounding effect of your micro-actions yields an undeniable physical reality. Your emergency reserve is no longer a theoretical concept, it is a tangible shield. The constant, background hum of financial anxiety that used to vibrate in your chest begins to dissipate, replaced by a cold, calculating calm. But a deeper psychological pitfall awaits those who grow complacent during this midpoint transformation. The human mind possesses an insidious vulnerability known as lifestyle creep. The moment the pressure eases, the ego seeks to reward itself by expanding its territory, reintroducing the very leaks you sacrificed to seal. To insulate yourself against this self-sabotage, you must adopt the mindset of stewardship. The ultimate financial mastery is not the aggressive acquisition of capital, it is the absolute responsibility of governance. It is the understanding that wealth is not a trophy to be displayed, but a living resource to be protected, cultivated, and respected. Just as an ancient farmer views a single grain of rice, not as an immediate meal, but as the genetic blueprint for an entire future harvest, you must view every single dollar as an autonomous worker destined to build your empire. By the time you cross the 1-year threshold, the compounding nature of this discipline completely rewires your psychological framework. You no longer recognize the person who stood in darkness 12 months ago, paralyzed by the size of the mountain. You have proven through relentless, daily execution that the path is created solely by walking it. 5 years from this moment, the trajectory you set today will have created an unbridgeable chasm between who you were and who you have become. You will exist as a person of absolute internal dominion, unshakable by economic turbulence, immune to social conditioning, and completely self-contained. The mountain will not have changed, but you will have conquered the terrain within. Every empire begins with the mastery of a single square foot. Stand your ground, look only at the next immediate step, and press your foot into the earth.